and the Donald Foster from the DMP Foster Family Trust. I think you were here to hear the previous submission on the subject, so it might give you some comfort.
Well, thank you for hearing me. I understand there have been a number of submissions on this particular issue, so if you'll bear with me, I have some points to make that weren't made in the previous submission. I just want to cover actually today that the claims made for proposed eligibility don't stack up. The proposal, I think, is poorly thought out. There are errors of principle and credibility, and the current criteria may not be perfect, but they're generally acceptable, workable, more credible, and given the claim of rate take neutrality, it really makes no sense for the council to change. Just looking at that first point, Steve Ballard's explanatory letter, which I've noted down below, claimed the proposed changes were to clarify qualifying criteria, improve transparency, predictability and consistency. Our property is 4.3 hectares, which is under the 5 hectare limit, and it has a land to capital value ratio of 65.9%, which is under the proposed limit of 66%. The point I want to make is that this could easily toggle, like many other properties, at every rateable valuation between being eligible and not eligible. So the question I ask is, how would you rate that for transparency, predictability and consistency? The next point I want to raise is, I think the proposal is poor, I think it's flawed and low on credibility. The letter I've just referred to from Steve Ballard advises eligibility currently depends on city zoning and assumed economic use. The proposed long-term plan on page 78 sets down that the object of these differentials is to collect less from identified remote rural properties. It's bad enough that those statements are not compatible on the rationale justifying the rates concession, but worse, neither acknowledges that the historic and fundamental reason relates to lower level of service to remote rural properties compared with urban properties. And that lower level of service remains the case, and that service principle has nothing to do with property size. One obvious reason neither document acknowledges this principle is that it would highlight flaws in the proposed property size criterion. We farm productively, but unlike our larger neighbours, don't qualify on proposed property size. But we all suffer the same diminished level of services under the general rate. So the proposed policy is arbitrary, as the Mayor noted, and unjustifiably discriminates against us and many others in our situation. Rate take neutrality. The letter claims the proposed change in eligibility criteria is rates neutral. If that is the case, there can be no justifiable reason for the Council to make a change when the proposed policy has little credibility and less integrity with it than the existing policy, which is generally accepted by ratepayers. So my conclusion is, for those of you who remember the furore that erupted when CCC last proposed to change the rural rate differential policy, which in that case was a proposal to eliminate it, it would seem foolish now to support a supposedly rate-neutral change which lacks integrity and is full of absurd effects and inconsistencies, as I've demonstrated, and fails to even acknowledge the basic reason for the concession. The present policy may have its administration difficulties, but council staff have managed with it, and councillors should stick with it rather than open up a new can of worms. It would be wrong, in my view, to support a proposed change unless you're also prepared to provide those smaller properties with the full suite of services available to urban ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you. I just think that pretty much sums it up. That given that it's rates neutral, that is something that we'll take into account. One of the disadvantages of me never actually expecting that I would be the mayor is that I have absolutely no memory of the furore that erupted the last time a council tried to do this, because obviously I wasn't living in a rural rates area. So, but I certainly have. We've heard enough advice from people who've submitted to know that it was a furore indeed. So,
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and we'll be taking that into account.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Now,